We landed on December 8th, 1966. We all knew it would be chilly, but the further north the boats had taken us, the less we believed that people were really living up there. After a year based in Jamaica, the northern wastes were a whole different world. The world our bombers created when the sands of Texas were cast into the sky during the atomic barrage preceding the Great Landing. I was there too, and so it seemed I'd now seen the full width of the war, the desert firestorms of the south and the blackened skies at noon of the north. The Soviets were waiting for us on the docks. They almost snarled at us. "We're not all softy dem-socks like old Charlie," I told them, but it wasn't about that. We were 10 minutes late, and that was 10 minutes of standing still in the icy ash that those troopers didn't appreciate. I stopped short of telling them how lucky they were, because the Luxembourg 1st Legion was headed far from the city's stoves and anti-radiation tents. Vancouver was intact, having fallen by assault with small arms. It was an injustice that Canada, lacking targets that attracted nuclear bombs, was seeing the worst of the fallout. Mother Nature's choice, I suppose. The Americans in the mountains had been in these miserable conditions much longer than us, and I don't know if that made them more tolerant of them or more desperate to get away. Both, I would imagine. But we took no prisoners as we advanced, so their side of the story would stay with their bodies on the icy peaks. There wasn't enough fuel to run jeeps up there and collect them, so leaving them was an easy decision. We had a perimeter around the city secured within a few weeks, so those Soviets could sleep safe and sound. They wanted to send us tanks, but none materialized. I doubt they would have lasted long out there, and it was too dark to drive more than half the time anyway. Even our rifles were starting to give up on us. They were the finest in the world when we'd been handed them in '62 back in La Rochette. I was one of the few in that army from the city. The rest were Germans, there to perform old Charlie's favors for the Socialist Federation. They understood World War IV to be something like World War II, that being the living memory of their upbringing. Handing them a rifle probably reinforced that dumb idea. Who needs their rifle now? Best weapon system you could ask for is a pair of binocs, a shovel and a radio. Spot, dig, call 'em in. Official advice is that you call 'em in before you dig, but if you do that, you aren't deep enough when the Strat bombers come humming down. In Texas, digging was easy. Vancouver was a strictly above-ground affair without digging machines, and the fuel for them went right to the Soviet carriers the moment they showed up. Luckily, no uranium left to mine up here, so High Command keeps their apocalypse bombs for the DC line. Every time a trooper complained that it was cold or that the roads were too icy for the SPGs to roll freely, I told them that they're in the cushiest damn pocket of the war. Big difference between clearing out nowhere villages knee-deep in cancerous snow and treading over the molten remains of the eastern seaboard. Bombs turned the land to glass just in time for the tanks to come shatter that too. Fascists can't tell us to stop. Worse than death for them. And winning this war is worse than death for us. So nobody wins. But at least all the Vancouver pocket had to offer was a crystalline nail in a coffin of charcoal. Just don't look up at that soup of a sky we've made. Our war there didn't last long. Didn't last a month, in truth. We got about 50 miles out of the city before the altitude pushed us past the limits of our cold weather gear. No trouble from the Americans then, whom we found daily in iced-over bunkers or half-buried tanks. I was there personally in one case where the turret of an MBT was peeking out through a snowdrift. Our whole column almost passed it by, it was so well hidden. When someone shouted about it, the boys and girls descended on it like a late Christmas present. You see, a lost tank might just have cylinders full of fuel buried with it, and that meant warmth. As the snow was clawed back, someone ended up on top of the thing and decided to try the hatch. Locked shut. But after they gave up, it opened of its own accord, and a creature lifted its head out. It was human-shaped, so covered in clothing that no further confirmation of its nature could be made. The troops dragged this fellow out and threw him down the snowdrift. Knowing what they would do, I quickly got out of my staff car to get my questions in as soon as I could. I and my staff asked the American where the rest of his company were, but he kept his mouth shut. No wonder. He had the infamous pin badge of the Silver Eagles on his collar, a purifier, trained not just to keep his mouth shut, but his eyes, ears, and anything that might let a bit of human spirit seep in. During the Texas campaign, we'd found cavernous graves, some burnt out, others still wet with oil when we scattered the guards. Undesirables, you see. Every Silver Eagle was a trained killer long before this war began, and they were stepping it up once they realized we were about to rumble the whole machine. Even then, with that killer sitting across from me in the back of my car, I didn't think I was any better than him. What's a world full of wasp supremacists got worse than a world of ice, ash, and the fading memory of the last harvests? I executed him to a stifled cheer and had his body returned to the tank, already the crypt for 4 of his crewmates. We didn't know where his friends were, but we knew they would die out there before we did. All the work we needed to do was done for us by the January storms. Iced us in so bad that 1 in 5 didn't make it back to Vancouver. The fascists, however, had got their act together. The city was clacking with gunfire, although we couldn't see what was happening. We had Soviet radio chatter to listen in on, but my primary translator was wheezing in the back of a medical truck. I ended up moving about 70,000 people into the northeastern blocks of the city, and then waiting. The gunfire lasted a few more days, same with the radio chatter. Eventually we got confirmation that the Soviets had shipped out, leaving the fascists between us and whatever was left of our own transports. We were told not to expect any food, and were reminded what would happen to us if we surrendered. Surviving Silver Eagle camps is one thing, but explaining yourself to the commissars was a whole new path of torment. So we waited. We hid in the buildings and peered out at the streets. The fascists came by now and again, but left when we shot at them. The soldiers would call out "No food here" in between bursts. There were perhaps only 2,000 Americans across the whole city, but I couldn't get enough able-bodied troops together to even scout out our own positions and find out who was still alive. The Americans started sniping at us from the inner city. Saw one girl shoot a whole magazine at a plane that passed overhead, only to keel over amid a fog of condensed blood spray. The sound of the shot echoed on in a second later, a mere formality. I would have leveled the whole city to get out, but the guns were on the outskirts, going the way of that American tank. No one wanted to go and staff them anyway. It was just a wait then. About 20,000 casualties between then and February 20th, the day of the truce. More were lost after that, but they were recorded differently, and not by me. The Americans were ordered to surrender, and some of them did. The thought of taking their supplies got enough of us out to capture their billets. Not much to find, but the All Clear had ships from VC Island docking by afternoon. We were saved. The world was saved. It took Charlie and company a long time to redraw the maps, drawing them like there was not a single poisoned lake or missing metropolis out there. Mother Luxembourg fared rather well in the proceedings, becoming something of a socialist union of the non-Soviet variety. Plenty out there not happy with that, including myself, but that was the way of it, and my part in the theatre of international destiny was over. The Comintern reported 85 million service personnel dead. Reported. Fascists claimed 20 million for their records, before Ink and Noose got them out of sight and mind. About 150 million civilians were killed by strategic bombing across Europe and the Americas. Records for Asia are not available at the time of writing, but my man on the inside says they are surprising, whatever you wish to infer from that. About 2.5 billion now face food shortages, and I don't think there's anyone yet alive who hasn't had their fill of radioactive particles. This is victory. It is not the dream the politicians sold our people, but we're forced to live for the victory so many died for, wishing not our places were reversed. Our rallying cry now, long live Luxembourg, for no one else will.